Hi, this is Kamera. My first few minutes with God, day number 347, Acts chapter 24 through 26. The high priest, Ananias, some of the Jewish elders, and the lawyer came to present their case against Paul to Governor Felix. The lawyer, Tertullus, he started off buttering up the governor. Then he began accusing Paul of being a troublemaker, constantly stirring up riots throughout the world among Jews, a ringleader to a cult named the Nazarenes, and he was trying to desecrate the temple when he was arrested. When it was time for Paul to talk, Paul tells the governor that all those accusations are false. He admits to following the way, which they call a cult. Paul says that he worshiped the God of our ancestor and firmly believes the Jewish law and everything written by the prophets. His hope is in God and that he will raise both the righteous and unrighteous. And because of this, Paul says that he always tried to maintain a clear conscience before God and all people. Then Paul tells the governor what really happened the day he was arrested in Jerusalem. Felix the governor, he was quite familiar with the way, and so he ended the hearing and told him that he would come up with a decision later once he meets with the commander. And so he ordered his officers to keep Paul in custody, to give him some freedom, and to allow his friends to visit him to take care of all his needs. A few days later, Governor Felix came back with his wife Drusilla. She's Jewish. And so they sent for Paul. They listened as Paul told them about his faith in Jesus Christ. They try to reason with him about righteousness and self-control and the coming day of judgment. Now, this frightened Governor Felix, and so he sent Paul away, but he sent for Paul quite often. This went on for about 2 years. He never released Paul. And so after 2 years, Felix was succeeded by a different governor, Porcius Festus. So Jewish leaders, they met with Festus earlier, but then they came and they appeared to court, the Jewish leaders. Many serious accusations they couldn't even prove against Paul. Paul denied all the charges. Festus, wanting to please the Jews, asked Paul if he was willing to go to Jerusalem, stand trial there. But the Jews had decided they were going to kill Paul if he came there. Paul replied, "No, you know very well I'm not guilty of harming any Jews." And so he was like, if I was guilty, then that fine, what have you. But if I'm innocent, no one has the right to turn me over to these men to kill me. So Paul yelled, "I appeal to Caesar." And so, a few days later, King Agrippa, he arrives with his sister Bernice to pay their respect to Festus. During their stay, Festus discussed Paul's case with the king. King Agrippa said he wanted to hear from Paul himself. The next day, Agrippa and Bernice, they arrived at the auditorium with great pomp, accompanied by military officers and prominent men of the city. Festus ordered that Paul be brought in. Paul gives his testimony of being a Pharisee. He has a zeal and always had a zeal for God. He talks about his persecution of believers. Then he tells them about his encounter and conversation with Christ. He tells them about his commission to preach to God the good news, God's good news to the Gentiles. King Agrippa, he says, "King Agrippa, I obeyed the vision from heaven. And now Jews are always plotting and falsely accusing him." And so Festus, he shouted that Paul, he said, "Paul, you are insane. Too much study has made you crazy." Paul replied, "I am not insane." he said, he was still showing respect to Festus. He says, I am not insane, most excellent Festus. What I am saying is the sober truth. King Agrippa knows about all these things. And he asked King Agrippa, do you believe the prophets? King Agrippa, he was like, do you think you can persuade me to become a Christian so quickly? Paul replied, whether quickly or not, I pray to God both you and everyone here in the audience might become the same as I am, except for these chains. Then the king, the governor, and Bernice, and all the others, they stood and left. As they went out, they talked it over and agreed, this man hasn't done anything to deserve death or imprisonment. King Agrippa, he says to Festus, he could have been set free if he hadn't appealed to Caesar. But the thing is, God had told Paul that he was going to Rome anyway, so it worked out the way God had planned. All those people, Paul took the opportunity to preach Christ to every last one of them. Look how God worked that out. That amazes me every time. But there you go, guys. That's day number 347. Acts chapter 24 through 26. You have a God-filled, blessed day.